Hey everybody, Javan Bernakevitch here with All Points Design and the incredible, the indelible Neil Bertrando. So very happy that everybody's here. We are talking about the Oregon State University Permaculture Design course. We're talking about assignment 11, or the final design. Now, something that I've picked up over the years is really to not necessarily call this the final design or the master design. These are designs that at some way, shape, or point are going to be worked upon. They're going to be changed. We started with patterns. All of these patterns of climate, patterns of topology, patterns of water and access and sectors and zones. And we've come all the way down that, and we've moved down to the details of the specific design for your site. Now, after only 10 weeks, chances are you're going to have a much better idea about your site, but you're not going to know everything about your site. And so I've moved from calling these plans master plans or final plans to working plans, because if you're going to take a look at the lineage of a site, your concept plan comes about here, and implementation and time and maintenance and change in ownership or change in climate or change in economics changes the plan. And one thing I find with humans is as soon as we say something is final or master, we then start to put it up against the site or put it up against other plans, and we start to say, well, this is wrong or this is right. And then we move out of an intuitive or an inquiry-based conversation, a critical conversation of understanding how things fit, and we move into a judgmental binary disposition. So I use the term working plan because it's one that fits really well. And as we go through this, really this assignment is about drawing everything together. So it's a time to show all of what your design mind has brought out to the end. Broughton's a word, right? Has brought out to the end of this course. The main ideas, the main conversations, the things that you want to show that you have done. One of the main things that Neil and I find, we were talking about this a couple of times before, is it's really hard for people to show their work. If you remember back in math, you would show every single one of the bed mass, the brackets, exponents. You would move through all of these pieces so that way we would understand the process that you went through. You would show your math steps. So similarly, if you've placed something in an area, tell us why you placed it there. Your zones, give us good explanation. Show us your previous zone. Show us how you've shifted. Show us how your mind has changed. Take a look at the water. Take a look at the circulation. Take a look at the principles, the practices, phasing plan, budget. You might not think budget's important. I can tell you now, as soon as you start putting money into a landscape, it's very important, as is phasing. Phasing can tell you where and when to spend money and where not to spend money. So all of those things are exceptionally important, and just take the time to enjoy this. If you're going to scrimp and save on anything in this assignment, scrimp and save on the rendering. Don't scrimp and save on the thinking. The thinking is important. The rendering, okay, a beautiful design is a beautiful design. You put it up on a wall, it looks great, but we want to make sure that this really fits for your site. And as always, make sure this is in your portfolio so you have all of your assignment leading up, because this assignment, out of all the others, I scroll back and I look at, okay, well, that doesn't make sense with what I saw before. And so for Neil and I to give you the best amount of feedback possible, really do take the time and the energy to show us the feedback, put it into the scheme of the portfolio, and have a good time with it. Neil, what are your thoughts about this assignment? You'll need to unmute, my friend.
I second everything you said. And also, I like that it forces people to clarify their vision and intention with the site, by putting a mission statement and a list of goals into the assignment and to clarify the context. I think that's really critical, because it also helps us to understand how your design fits not only the physical and ecological pattern of the landscape, but also the social pattern of how you or the design residents and clients will use the site. So that one is one worth putting a significant amount of time into. I encourage people to use SMART goals if they can, something that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely or time-bound. So putting dates and numbers into your goals, I think, is can be valuable for this assignment. It just brings a sense of reality to it, similar to what Javan mentioned with the budget. It really kind of clarifies down when you're going to do what, how you're going to assess how well you've done, or if you've moved towards your goals. And yeah, I really encourage you to use the sounding board of the permaculture principles and just see how you can use them to integrate and feed your design and kind of drive it along with the rest of your site assessments that you've done throughout the course. So, you know, take the time to revisit your sector map and your previous zones and these other maps that you've created, your rainwater flow, all the assignments that you've done, because they really feed the fact that the design ideally is a response to the site and to your analysis, as opposed to imposing what you want onto it. So yeah, let's I'd be excited to take a look at some examples and walk through them with you.
Awesome. So I'm going to start off with an assignment that we've seen a lot of already in this video series. Urban site in the UK, really started from the big existing to applied. And I like that they did this on the first slide because they gave us the mission statement and the goals, and they also showed us what does the vision look like and where did we start off with. It's a wonderful way, especially for clients, to really show where it is you're taking them and not withholding that within the way that you show this work and how it's moving. Mission statement, really matter of fact. Again, the goal is very matter of fact. Still has a title block down here, has a border, always having the north arrow. Gets us into water first, as normal, as usual, as always. We need to understand water and what it looks like. Has a couple of the new implementations. So we have some gray water management systems in here that we're playing with. We have how water flows onto site, where it moves through site, where ponds might be, and then a really great explanation. What's the total amount of capture? What's the total amount of use? Where's the front yard? Where's the other yard? What's the gray water conversation going to be about? Still has his contours in there. Love that the contours are in there because it always allows me to understand. Still has a scale bar. But here we've got a key or a legend-based concept plan versus a call-out. We'll show you both, but this is, you know, take a look at a number, go over and take a look at what the number is. One thing that is tough, and I think this is really important for most people, is, you know, he's written in here proposed, existing, proposed, existing, proposed, existing. What I do suggest is giving us some other type of delineation to show us what is existing and what is proposed. I really enjoy having the existing being gray or grayscale, and then what you proposed is color overlapped. Gives me a really quick way of being able to determine it. You do something like this is fine too. It's just a little bit more work for myself and for Neil to go through. So just always think about, if Neil and I are burning calories trying to figure out your work, chances are we're not spending the calories diagnosing your work, which is where most of the value comes in with having somebody take a look at your work here. So here we have zones and the new zones and the conversation about why these zones are the way they are. As usual, as you can see, there is no zone 5 in this one. You know, there's not always all zones in all places. So in your new design, doesn't have to have all zones either. Then he gives me little details and call outs, which I love. He's gone through all the pieces and he's shown me down to what is the hugelkultur going to be contained, all of the different types, where they're going to be placed. Has gone through this in every single one of these brilliant little call outs in the different zones. He's gone further. He's given us a couple of renders. So he's shown us what the espalier is going to look like here with the grape and with the Asian pears on the sides and with another Asian pear, mixed planting at the bottom. Nice little simple render. Again, these things don't have to be very complex. He's gone down and he's shown us some really great, this is probably my favorite circulation map, because one, he's taken that grayscale or blued here. He's actually blued out the the under concept, and then he's used a bright color that really show us how people walk and move in this. So it's very easy to see the circulation pathway. Showed us the principles, showed us a simple phasing plan, talked a little bit about social permaculture, which I always appreciate. And that was it. You know, it's 8 pages. It's fine. It's what it takes to put the information to page. So I really appreciate a lot of things about this. Neil, what's your thoughts on this? Good, bad, the ugly?
There we go. Okay. Yeah. Well, it looks like it contains everything required of the assignment. I really like the use of formatting and bolding to clarify each portion, consistency with the title block on every page, scale bar, north arrow, contours where appropriate. All that stuff is really nice. The keys and the legends that are used, I like all that. So just as a general pattern to the assignment, he hits on all the key visual baseline for communicating graphic information criteria that I'm really hoping that we help you to understand through the course. So that's good to see. I like the mission statements and goals. They're really straightforward and to the point, and then he goes into like how some of the goals are achieved through the design. I also like kind of the comparison of the before and after. I think that's a really powerful piece to put into there. Here's what the existing is versus the proposed. So he does that on this first page. And since there's not much currently existing, that could, I think, like you said, be easily communicated with the grayscale, or he could just bold the things. It looks like he's removing most of it. So that could be the case as well, is that just all the existing stuff got removed there. Let's see, let's go to the water flow one. So he used lots of symbols on the vegetation and property map, and that one, that lends itself to that numeric key that he used. So that I think was a good choice, because if you start to get into tons of symbols, that can be a struggle. The water flow I really like, because like you said, he's got the contours, so it makes it easy to kind of do a fact check, as well as he's got very clean, clear key with color code for where water flows on the site, water flows off the site, how it's moving through the site. I also really like his descriptions. So like the gray water addition there, where water is actually being stored, where it's then the overflows for the pond are shown, which is great. All these little different flow diagrams and locations. Yeah, and then the description I really like, because he's organized and itemized it out into categories, right? He's got water flow, other impermeable surfaces, like stuff flowing onto the side or the roof. He's defined that clearly. He's got the water flow management. How is it going to be managed as it moves through the site? So he's using that principle of flowing from source to sink, which I really think is an important way to think about water and nutrients and energy on your site. And he's included, a wastewater plan as well in his water flow. So, that is a really good layout and put together. I don't know exactly, his site looks like is in UK, so probably don't need irrigation, and that's a pretty consistent summer rainfall type of climate. So if you're in a climate that requires irrigation to keep things alive, I encourage you to start thinking through that as well, because that becomes an important driver of your design and the water flow through your site. Where you distribute it, how you reticulate it through an irrigation system. I would consider that part of the flow, not just the overland flow. So that's something to keep in mind and think about. And then the breakouts of the details, because he's done a really extensive amount of detail work on the overall site plan. It's hard to see at the scale that the entire site is drawn. So to be able to look at each intensively designed area in detail is really valuable, and it really starts to bring the site process and design to life. And at that higher resolution, it makes it also possible to think through, okay, well, what if I want to just implement one of these details? well, now I have the entire list of things that, you know, the existing and introduce things for that one area. So that makes it, in my opinion, a valuable tool for actual site development as well. So it does make it more of that working plan, like what you mentioned, Javan. And then really clear drawing, and that's excellent. You know, just to be able to see, even with all the colors and all the different symbols, you know, it's very clear and easy to tell where the different plants locations are, what the different types of paths are, and that sort of thing. Pathways and circulation, I really like to see that included with the zones. Also on the details, I like how he's itemized them by zone, and that's a good thing to have. You know, in your larger zones, you're likely going to have less complicated details. Also, he does have it here with his zones. I just don't see the. Oh, he's clarified his pathways by the zone categories, which is great. I really like that as well, because you're going to have different access needs in different zones. You know, this is an urban site, so it's not like we can have a tractor or something like that to halt things around, but often that can be the case in your zone 3 or zone 4. So thinking about and organizing your pathways and circulations in line with your zone assessment and placement is really valuable in my opinion. And personally, I'd like to see the zones map overlaid with the pathways and circulation. So, you know, he's blued out the rest of his design. It'd be nice to just see, okay, here's zone 1, 2, 3, 4 on the map at the same time as the pathways. And I think we have some examples where that is the case, so you can see how it looks. That's something I never did before coming to this class, actually, but learned it from seeing some students do it, and I've emphasized it ever since. Yeah, and then great details on the phase planning. I love the table, you know, so that it's organized and itemized by year, as well as he's kind of integrated the, it looks like some of the rows are consistent, like water row, structure row, some of that sort of stuff. And easy, simple layout to read how he applied the design principles and that sort of stuff. So overall, looks like a great assignment.
Thanks for your thoughts there, Neil. Let's see one of yours.
Okay, sounds good. All right, can you guys see this one?
Yes, indeed.
So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Well, we'll start here. So this assignment, I like, it's short. It's got 4 pages. He's even got, you know, drawing number 1 of 4 there. That's nice to keep track of. It's got a clean title block. I like that he's used, you know, clear formatting to separate, you know, the mission statement, the goals, the different categories and tasks that we're asking you to do. I like that he's kept, organized it very cleanly and consistently, and kept it relatively brief. You know, if you can convey all the information you need in a smaller space, then that's great. You know, he's got a clear mission statement. He's got itemized goals. Again, they could be a little bit more detailed, but you know, at least they're very clear. Low maintenance and productive system. Well, you know, how low maintenance and how productive, you know, would be some of my questions, but that's a good place to start. And at least, you know, simple and clear. And then he puts the principles here. Phase planning, I like with the, you know, timeline. Some things that are going on the entire time versus other things that are only going on, you know, part of the time, which is nice. Breaking it up into years. Sometimes I encourage people to do seasons also, because there's certain things that can only take place during certain seasons, and you don't want to overload yourself if you can help it. And then he's got a list of his drawings, an index or, you know, table of contents, which is really nice. And then his drawing uses, you know, kind of consistent graphic standards, landscape architecture graphic standards type of images, which is really nice. And it's hand drawn and then put into this digital format, and really well communicated visually. he doesn't have a graphic key, which would be nice to see, but he's got callouts for the details. So let's zoom in a little bit. And some of these, requires significant zooming in and out, and that's okay. I like, this is at 100% on my screen at least, so it's legible at full size.
Hey Neil, have you moved off of the first drawing?
Yes, I have.
I'm still just seeing the first drawing.
Okay. For some reason it paused it. Okay. I'm sorry.
Awesome.
So here's the second drawing. As I mentioned, hand-drawn, graphic standards, callouts, no graphic key. I think that would be a great improvement, but the callouts are clear. I'm going to zoom in, and the symbols that he uses, because he uses graphic standards, make it clear. Like you can see where he has a gravel or stone path as opposed to a dirt or mulched path. Also, he's got clear labeling in his callouts, cisterns. You can see where the water flows clearly by the graphics that he's used. Calls out different types of trees, also if they're existing or proposed. Back out a little. It's a a rural, but also kind of residential suburban scale type of site. So I like how he does have his companion planting guide, his list of plants. Where he does list plants, he lists scientific names, which is exciting to see. I really encourage you to include the botanical or scientific names on all of your plants. It just is good to keep you practicing, getting used to and familiar with that system. Then he's got each different type of treatment he's got a call out for. So at least as opposed to having a graphic key, every different graphic piece he's got some sort of call out for, like the mixed terrace gardens, blackberry and gooseberry dominant combined with companion planting. So he's, it's very clear, okay, that's what's going on these terraces, and that they're terraces, which is something that I wouldn't infer just from the graphics. So it's important to have a call out for that to make sure that I understand what he's proposing. And then I can comment on that and share thoughts or resources. This is an assignment where I'm much more likely to share some sort of web reference or resource with you based on what you're proposing to help get you to the next step. So when you share details like that, it helps me to be able to provide that sort of feedback as well. So this is he's even got his date here, the property size, 0.25 acres. I'd like to see a 0 in front of that because it helps to clarify it. I'm going to go on to the next page. So then he's got details about his water and energy systems, his compost toilet, so his wood burning stove, his solar panel electricity. So the kind of the waste and production systems, which is great gray water distribution, wildfire sprinkler as part of his water system, which is really important for a site like this. One thing I'd be wondering about, is a little bit more details on the irrigation, but definitely this gray water distribution system is great to see that as part of the irrigation. And let's go on. Okay, then he's got his his zone map. So he's got basically also zone 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, no zone 5. It's a small site. Again, totally fine. This one I would like to see a little bit more detail on the pathways and circulation, how he's actually moving through the site. He's got some water flow in here, so he's integrated the water flow in the zone map, which is reasonable. You can see the paths clearly based on the zone 1 design and the pathways of the underlying map, but I'd still like to see the circulation marked so that I understand that you've thought through how you're actually going to move through the site, especially your primary pathways. And I think it's also worth thinking about what vehicles will use each type of path. For example, I'd be interested to see where his car park is. It looks like it's up here at the peak of zone 1, but even if it's off site, that would, to me, that becomes a important site factor, because that's how you access the site, how you bring materials to the site. So that influences how materials and energy and you move through the site, which is really important from a design standpoint, to understand and communicate that and be able to think about and iterate that based on the response of the beginnings of installation of your design. So really make sure you include that pathways and circulation element. It just is, I think, more important than it's often given, than the amount of attention that it's given. So this is the end of his. And I think this was actually from before we started the social permaculture part of the design. So there's some things missing from this because it's from back in 2016 that we want in your current design. So thoughts, Javan?
Yeah, great example for a number of the reasons that you pointed out. Good graphic standards, great title bar. Of course, naked decimals are a problem in any field and institution. So is it 25 acres? Is it 0.25 acres? Really nice rendering. So they leveled on their strengths. And if you are going to level on your strengths, or if you want to use these types of things, really notice how he's made the trees transparent so you can still see underneath. It's really about understanding the whole site and all of the different pieces. The call outs are exceptional. I really appreciated that. If you want to go to the next one there, Neil. So one thing here, which is
this
great.
Is the energy one.
Yeah, the energy and nutrient circulation. One thing that's really interesting here is that if I was this individual and this was my composting toilet and that was my composting bin, I would not want to take that out too often. So that would be one of those comments I would make to this individual. And if we saw circulation, we would know that even more so, because currently the pathways actually have a rather circuitous route that would take you sort of in an S curve almost to get there, which I can tell you, when you're hauling a bucket of human manure, you don't want to take a circuitous route. You want the quickest way that takes care of your manure. So that would be one of those things that I would definitely be speaking about. And I'll tell you right now, as you're doing this, really think about frequency and how close things are. Love that he's put the distribution out there. Love that he's put in all of these details. This is great. And then the next one there, Neil. So as Neil was saying, he's got a great opportunity here to overlap a number of maps. So he's done his water flow, he's done his zones. I would love to see circulation. And as we spoke about in circulation before, showing us the frequency of that circulation. So if one pathway is once a week, twice a week, once a month, twice a month, it'd be interesting to understand in this, if I'm somebody who's only seen this right now as I am, it's a pathway that goes to the north. I'm curious, well, where does that go? What's that all about? So if I understand the frequency, if that's a pathway that's twice or three times a day, I'm guessing that's probably where transport is or where they move. Would be nice to see water onto site, water off of site. This is a rather straightforward site, so it's not totally necessary, but the arrows really do give us that conversation and what's going on here. Overall, quick to the point, easy to see, easy to understand. Really good project. This is great, and this one in particular, because it doesn't focus on all of the vegetation, and this is a great comparison to the last one. I can give high-level advice on this one. I don't have to give that advice, because if I'm presented with 4 or 5 different planting schemes, I'm going to look at them and see if they make good sense. So really good use of time on this one. Neil, I think I'm going to share one of mine here. So
sounds good.
Do we have Jim's being shown right now? Not yet. Let's try again. How about now?
It was for a second.
Back up?
Yep, I can see it.
Awesome. So right off, starting with mission statement, goals, really nice expanded goals. Talking about land restoration being a big conversation for these folks. Food. A lot of this is at the stage where it could be this is a farm and it was going into production, this could be posted and presented to the world to communicate their vision. Continuing with goals, talking about energy, talking about waste, talking materials, talking about learning and teaching and inspire. So great, they've really covered this conversation. As we get into the following building and infrastructure elements are planned for Hearthfield, Heatherfield, they're really starting to tell us all of the pieces and why they're interesting and why they want to have them. I love this. This really tells me what these folks are all about. So as we get into the master plan or the final design plan or the working plan, all depend on how you look at this. Again, simple call outs, easy to see, easy to understand. I want to make a caveat here. The design project is not the time to go to the permaculture store and start grabbing things off the shelf. It is the time to take a look at the things that work best for your design and why they are there. So don't throw a herb spiral in it because you think it has to be there. Don't throw a gray water system in there because you think it has to be there. Do it because it makes good sense. And this is what I like about this conversation is they've really shown us the description in the notes. Zones. So because their site is so big and their zone conversation is quite in depth, they've taken 2 slides to do this. And then we have their new zone conversation, which is great to see. They've also shown us the new zones with an N. So great. I know what is existing and what they thought and why these are new. Then they've gone to show us the site water flow and use. Shown us where there's going to be a few more ponds. Shown us what the flow is like. I think this site in particular could benefit from a conversation about wastewater, could benefit from potentially an irrigation conversation, but it's just water flow. Existing vegetation, showing us the existing vegetation, showing us contour, great to see. Again, yellow is a wonderful color to use for contour because, again, if you're not looking at it as in the white, it disappears, and even here it disappears quite well. Now we're seeing the introduced vegetation showing us where the timber plantation is, showing us where the orchard is. We went back and forth quite a bit in our notes talking about an orchard that's so far from the house. And that was definitely a critique of mine, is that you have a lot of work here. Timber I'm not too worried about, but this is quite a bit away. And they said, well, we're going to be coming in and out a lot. Yeah, but you don't have your tools with you, and you have different eyes when you're coming in and out of the house as opposed to eyes for pruning or for maintenance. So we had a pretty good conversation about that. They wanted to showcase, and so we ended up settling on a showcase that was actually more of an edible ornamental display that gave a lot more information. So it's a good piece. Talking about biomass forests, so all of the different biomass. They talked about the alley crops of fodder, grain, legumes, and pastures. They showed all the trees. Didn't show us the planting, which is fine. Nut permaculture fruit and nut orchard. This is one of those designs, and actually Neil's example right before us. These are good examples that would benefit from a cross section of the proposed design. I think these in particular, a cross section that bisects the property, cross section that bisects the property. I think 2 or 3 here would be fantastic. Showed us all the plantings and what they were doing. So all of these numbers then correspond with these to give us more descriptions. Human pathways and circulation, showing us the areas. Didn't necessarily show us specifically all those areas. Would love to have seen more of that. They showed us the brown pathways. Didn't give us necessarily a legend to say brown is for people. Gray is new grass, farm roadway. Could have been a little bit more specific here, and would have loved to seen frequency of use. All of this actually made really good sense. I loved the educational and the thought that went into this. Good to see the principles, and being a chart fellow myself, love seeing this detailed Gantt style chart, really showing us winter, spring, summer, fall, showing us when the detailed design and workout is going to be over these blocks, when these specifics are going to happen. Winter's off. Winter's a great time to obtain the permit. So I really start to take a look at those outliers to see if they're working well. Really well done on this. They've kept the legend on the second page so I can still read it. I don't have to go back and forth, which is frustrating. Great work on this. Social permaculture reflections as is necessary now in this work, showing us what could potentially be used. So talking about Willow Cane Coppice Farm that teaches traditional basket making, talking about pastured beef, pork, and lamb. And then the additional project information, which was the rest of their assignments, and specifically why they thought it was appropriate to have it here, which was brilliant, because these are the things I'm looking for. I'm coming down here anyways to take a look at their plant and property line and understand all these pieces. So really well done, very extensive. But again, the more time you take working on this cognitively, chances are the more time, money, and energy you save in the implementation. So, bravo to this student, and this would be a lovely one actually to come back and to connect with and see how they're doing. Neil, what's your thoughts about this one?
I think it's great. I really like the baseline graphic standards, the consistent title block, the formatting, putting things into tables and charts, making it really easy to read, making it really easy to take in all the information as a whole quickly from both a design presentation and review and evaluation standpoint. I think that makes a design very powerful, and it also makes it easy. It makes it easier to critique and adjust and adapt, based on specific details that are shared. So I really like all that. Totally agreed. The cross section would be great here. Rarely do I do a design where I don't do at least 2 cross sections. It just really helps both you to conceptualize how things are laid out relative to each other, as well as to communicate that to other people. And it's a good kind of mistake proofing step, because it's easy to design things that don't make sense from a elevational perspective when you're just drawing from a plan view. It also shows us that you've really thought it through. So let's see, other things I really like. I like the kind of pattern level. Make sure you get the pattern level down first before going into all the details of individual plantings and stuff, because at the pattern level is where you can make the highest leverage shifts in your actual design. So if we can have a conversation there, then that's where often Javan and I can contribute the most value. But they do have the details of the different tree species, for example, that they would be planning to use, which is fairly diverse. So I really like that. I like how they have pathways for both vehicles and for people, and that they've easily graphically differentiated that. I don't see that in this specific one. It looks like this is mostly the people pathways. And something I'd like to see on this page, for example, would be a key. Because I can assume that the red line is the dotted line is the property boundary. I can assume some things, about what these green lines are, but not. It would make it very clear if there was just a key. And there's a lot of white space here, between like Country Road 29 and the actual site, where they could fit in a significant amount of information from a key perspective. For example, they have like house and carport and greenhouse and stuff labeled here, and I couldn't even see that barely from before it was zoomed in. And that was, if they had just labeled it with a big H, a G, and a GH, and then had a key, and I could understand that much more quickly and easily. Let's scroll down to a couple of the other ones. I love the timeline, seasonal plus easy to read Gantt chart, like definitely valuable. Also to link it with zones, because I think often it's going to take. I often encourage people to focus on the interior zones first, because you get the most rapid feedback from those, and you learn quickly about how your site responds to your design implementation. So I think that's really valuable. I like how they use the social part to communicate and think about the design of how their site connects with the broader community. And I think that's a really valuable piece to reflect on, is how does your design connect to your community and kind of the larger scale of people and networking and ecology in your area. Because some people will want to be very active in their community and use their site to facilitate that, whereas others might want to use their site to actually increase or include their privacy, but have some of the things from their site integrate into the overall community. And so there's lots of different ways to approach this, but just to, I encourage you to think about what are the relationships that currently exist between my site and the community and myself and the community, and what are the relationships that I would like to see existing, and then start to draw the connections between the site elements and places in the community. So this kind of emphasized that and iterated that pattern to me, so I wanted to mention that. Toronto, okay. So this is also likely a summer rainfall location, so not as much concern about irrigation and water distribution. But again, I just want to emphasize, if you're in a site where that is an important part of your climate patterning, at least show us where your water supply is and where you can start distributing your irrigation from, because it just becomes a very critical piece of the site design and development. If you don't need irrigation so much, like they have the potential pond sites, so they have some of that. So at least a source, which is in my opinion, if you can't find your sources for your water and think about how you're going to move it through the site, then there's no point in designing vegetation or other aspects, because the water drives all of that. So yeah, it looks like they've done a good job of at least showing some potential and how the water is flowing, so that's great. Notations of limitations also great. Again, like Javan said, this is a working plan or a concept plan. So if there's things put in that need more information and evaluation, make those notes, because that's part of your plan, is to get that information. And if you've identified the things that you need to know, it puts you one step closer to actually getting information and answers for those things. Yeah, overall, really thorough, totally great. And I love that they've connected it to the rest of their site assessment. So that stuff's all referenceable.
Awesome, Neil. Awesome. Thanks for those thoughts. Let's take a look at the last example that you have.
Okay. It says I can't share while you are sharing.
Well, that's just not very pleasant, is it? How's that?
Good, now I'm trying to select. I'm going to do this one. Okay, can you see that? No, you can't. Okay, try again. How about now?
There we go.
Okay. So this student has their project all presented as slides in a portfolio, which I really like. And Javan introduced me to is something that's what I now consider kind of a good baseline. It's all organized clearly with like a table type of format, easy to tell where the different parts start and end, clear mission, very simple. Design goals, itemized, and then bullet points of the things underneath each one that support it, or designs by categories, which I really like. For example, they have their growing season, so production category, ecological category, community category. I think that's a really great way to organize things. So then this site is a multiple residence site. So it's a little bit more of a community type of scenario where they have group living in several buildings, and then one, abandoned building that she's proposing that they can develop into something that's of higher value and use on the site, which is great. I really like the call outs as well as the clear graphic standard on the drawing, so it makes it easy to tell what is being used where. Also, for some of the details onto the design, like the numbers for this detailed section, she's proposing multi-use space. Well, then what are these multiple uses? And clear enumeration of those with a numerical outline is great. This was a challenging site because it's exposed to bears. It's right along a waterway. It's right near the forest. It's kind of very wildlife intensive. So I liked that she also kind of stayed minimal with the design. It's not totally filled out with fruit trees and stuff like that. It's in a floodplain. It's got heavy wildlife influence. So kind of matching the design response to the setting was really, really well done. I like that she's integrated both her vegetation and her water flow maps. I think that this was really well communicated, where the existing vegetation is one color, the introduced vegetation is another color, and the water flow is a third color. So really good color coding. I'd like to see species names, ideally, rather than just common names. That's definitely something I advocate for consistently. But well labeled, easy to see 8 through 12. Okay, that's in this 8 through 12 section, and she's organized it into a category, so I can quickly reference that when I'm looking for it. And not a whole lot, not a huge extensive amount of introduced planting. So I really like that she's kept it simple. She's kept it clustered around, area zones, zone 1, high activity zones where changes are going to happen. She can get rapid feedback from that when they start to implement things. So I really like that. And then the zones, well communicated, simply laid out. Again, integration of pathways and circulation into the zone map, and very specific key showing what type of foot traffic or vehicle and bike traffic. Frequency zones 4 and 5 are different than zones 0 through 3. So you probably can use a different type of pathway in those scenarios. So that's great. You can see where people get in and out of their vehicles, where they park their vehicles. It's not in the garage, it's outdoors. So all that stuff is really helpful to clarify how people move into and through the site and then leave the site. And then she's organized different types of site element and uses within each zone and clarified that. So I think that's really good too, because that allows us to have a good conversation about the frequency. She hasn't specified those things, but I can quickly say, well, how often is the lawn area used? Or how often do you need to use the outdoor composting area? And putting it in a zone 3 makes sense in a situation like this because they don't use it year round. They don't want bears right next to their buildings, those sorts of things. So sometimes it is good to have it a little bit further away, but we want some rationale on that to fit with the design as a response to the site factors, as opposed to just saying, well, I'm just going to put it over here because I need to rubber stamp it in. Again, just very clear and easy to read examples of the principles used and the design phase planning. I personally would like to see something a little more graphical or bullet point list, that sort of stuff. It really just helps me to understand the items that are being proposed from a phase planning standpoint, because then we can have a more clear conversation about is it realistic, for example. And this one has some mention of budget, which I really also encourage people to put in more detail. What's your budget for year 1? Okay, well, do all those items that you have listed actually fit into that budget constraint? Or there's some that you can prioritize and there's other ones to year 2. So for me, from a practical standpoint, whenever I'm working with a client or on my own projects for myself, I'm always thinking about how much it's going to cost, how much money do I have, and how much time do I have to put into a project for that year or that season. And then that gives me some factors that are realistic and also that I can play with and adjust based on what I really want to do and what I have time to do for that year. So I encourage you to just get into that level of planning and thinking if you can at this point. This is a good chance to do that and get some feedback from us on it. So, Javan?
Yeah, I'd love to go through it there. If you take me all the way, don't know if I need to see slide 1. I think it was slide 2 where we start to see most of the work here. Yeah. So as usual, just I think Neil and I can both say ditto to each other. I think what's great about this is it really shows us that in outside of zone 1 and zone 2 and in natural areas, quote unquote natural areas that are closer to wilderness, or call it unsettled or a bit more wild places, there's very little that needs to be done. And in these 2 slides, you really get a sense that this is an individual that really wants to be cognizant of the native and the non-native and what they're bringing in and what they're not bringing in. So that was fantastic to see. Neil, if you show me the next slide. So something I appreciated about this is they showed the native and the non-native species that they were speaking about that was already existing, and also what was to be introduced. And then they also spoke about what they were looking at potentially starting to bring in terms of the choice of vegetables. So onions, ramps, spinach, kale, squash. But again, that would be only in that greenhouse conversation, because obviously this is a place that's a little bit cooler. The water flow notes, again, great to see where water is coming in, great to see where it's coming off of, not only on the main site, but also in all the buildings, because again, we've got a multitude of sites here and buildings that have their own little watersheds. I'll take a look at the 4th slide there, Neil. So this I really appreciate, seeing everything all together. So seeing the zones and seeing the traffic patterns. I'm a little like, I'm guessing that this is a front door and a back door, and that's how these pathways work. Either that or people walk up and over the building. So that would be an interesting thing to chat about with that individual, to understand where they moved and how that worked. And it's such a minute detail. And then when you look at it, it's like, wow, is that up and over? Is that through? Because some of them are almost just outside, and maybe that 5th one from the bottom actually has a door that's on the north side, which is possible, and this one at the bottom actually has 2 doors and they're right on the southwest corner. It's possible, but I'd be something I would want to check into. Nice to see the patterns. Would love to see the frequency. I think that would be a great thing to see as well. Nice to see the delineation of the zone 0 to 3 foot traffic and the 4 to 5. Nice to see that 0 to 3 is a darker color, which makes sense. There's more foot traffic. Lighter colors zones with less frequency are a lighter color. That makes really good sense. Overall, really good work and conversation. I like the tire tracks of each car. Little bit of whimsical nature into this. And then on the last slide, I think a lot of what they've done here is smart. They've shown us generally what they're going to be doing, but they really could have, as Neil talked about, given us a sense of duration. Also, I would say this person and probably most of the designs I see are very ambitious. I would say negatively so for completion. When I work with clients, either in life design or land design, small successes early on are the big win. That allows for further successes. So testing soil for contamination in parking lot and areas, plan accordingly, begin to decontaminate. Okay, well, what's involved there? Zone 1 hugelkultur bed and rain chain system, outdoor composting area, starting native plant guild, perennial plants and composting area, research plan and budget for abandoned building modifications, including rodent, pest, and inspection, stop chemical applications on site. Whew. I hope somebody has a full-time job for that one, because that's going to be 20, 25 hours a week for an entire year. So that to me is a very ambitious conversation. So if you said during the questionnaire that you have 5 to 6 hours a week, okay, you got 5 to 6 hours a week, put that to a year span, you got 260 hours. Well, let's be serious. If there's 10 hours of planning for every 1 hour of installation, you've got 260, 10 hours to 1, you've got 25 hours of planning or 250 hours of planning, you got 25 hours of installation. That'd be realistic in a year for most people who are not doing this as a full-time occupation, unless you were going to hire people in. So just keep that in mind. Budget, even if you're rough, it's easier to amend a budget than it is to make a budget in the first place. So spend the energy trying to make the budget in the first place. Because when you have that, like, I don't know how much it's going to cost, call around, ask Neil or myself, if we were going to put in a full installation like this, roughly what would the cost be? For most landscapes, you're looking at 10% of build, 10 to 15% of build. So if you've got $1 million site, you got $100,000 landscape. It's a real rough number that gives you a chance to modify off of it. But it's surprising how often that rule of thumb really holds true. Generally, really good visual language, good presentation, always kept me knowing where I was at and what was being said to me. A couple things we said could be improved upon. And then if we were going to go into the design, and again, we're not necessarily in these videos, this is about how to present really well, but there's a couple of things here that are questionable. It's really about frequency. I really call upon and recommend you guys take a look at frequency of use. How close are things to where they might be used, and are they necessary? Really resist putting something in for putting it in's sake and going along the permaculture shelf and the permaculture grocery store, just pulling something because it looks interesting. I would say this site out of all the sites really goes on the simplistic, which means much more, has a higher much more likely to being put into place. But again, the amount that they put in on the first year, I think, is very ambitious. Great example, Neil. Thanks for showing this one.
You bet.
All right. So I think in closing here, Neil, maybe just a couple of thoughts from you about the design that maybe we haven't talked about before, if you had anything else to say.
I just want to really second your reference at the end of that last one, where you talk about going back to the client questionnaire. That it can be a really powerful tool to actually go back to before you come into your design, because it provides you with a bunch of lists that you created before for things that you are existing on the site and things that are proposed for the site. It allows you to check in with how much time and money you have available for the site, who's going to use the site, all those sorts of things. So that's a really powerful tool to review for you and to integrate into your design actual development as you build it out conceptually. So I think that part I would recommend people do, as well as, again, revisiting your sector map with some of your previous site assessment pieces, because the design should emerge from the actual assessment of the site, both of yourself or the client and the site. And so check in with those, use those to feed the rest of it. I encourage you to take it from pattern to detail. So, again, like Javan mentioned, don't worry about getting the rendering of the site down so that it's really beautiful in the first try. Start by just getting the broad brushstrokes out there. What are the zones? What are the frequencies of use? What are the paths? What's the water flow? What are the different elements that you want? And then where might they go, or what are the use spaces? What are some patterns of use space? Is this alley crop? Is it windbreak? Is it chicken forage and run? Is it the human use, like gathering for outdoor kitchen and relaxed patio area with a barbecue or fireplace or something? What are the use spaces? Start to brainstorm around that before you decide, here's the specific plant or the plant pattern and guild I'm going to use. Because the pattern to detail approach is a really powerful permaculture principle that you can be practicing in this. And I encourage you to do that, because again, the high level design conversation happens at that pattern level. That's where we can really give you a huge amount of guidance. And then as it narrows down to individual plant selection and that sort of thing, then we can also give you that information, but I wouldn't start there. I would drive your design from the pattern and response type of approach.
Awesome, Neil. Awesome. Thanks so much for your notes there, and thanks so much for uh, embarking on this journey of trying to add a little bit more value to the folks as we go through this process. It's not an easy one to go through, and I really appreciated having you as my co-pilot. Your experience in design, your experience in thoughtfulness, and your experience of being able to bring in new information is really inspiring, and something that makes me really, really happy to call you my colleague. So thanks so much for your help in all this. To all the students that have been watching this, thanks so much for coming along and taking a look at potentially another way of looking at the assignments. Two major things to send you off with. David Shaw once said, PDC is a great place to start, but it's a terrible place to stop. And as this is the last video we have with you, I just want to pass on a couple of words of wisdom. Really do get out there and really do start to network and connect with other permaculturalists, transition towns, anybody who's starting to see that natural law bats first and last, and human law is just that little in-between place. If you take a look at any of the information that's out there, you know that we have an incredibly short window that seems to be shrinking to be able to change and to work within the ecology that we're given, to be in an incredible place. If you take a look at our solar system, as far as we know, there's only one planet that can sustain this type of life, and it's a pretty beautiful place. So thank you so much for taking the time and the energy to be in this course. One thing I want to warn you folks about is that there's some weird thing that happens in a permaculture design course that somehow makes people feel that they know more than folks who have spent 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the field. You don't, I don't, Neil doesn't, we don't. So please do not take the information of this course and walk into the world entitled. It is a terrible use of the gift of the information that you've been given. Think of it this way. You have information now. And in some situations, you've been able to complex that into knowledge. And the way you do that is you add context. Take information like a black Australorp, which is a type of chicken breed, has a high awareness of predation. And you put that into context, like I live in a place with a lot of predation. There's a lot of birds of prey. And so I'm going to try out this black Australorp. And that would give you knowledge. Now you would have knowledge. Most of what we have in this course is information at best. Some of you have applied a little bit and started to see things, but at best we have information. So then you have knowledge. Great. So how does knowledge transfer into wisdom? Through experience. Knowledge plus experience equals wisdom, because you've put the black Australorp into practice and you've seen, yes, indeed, 80% of them really do have a good sense of predation, and the slightest bit of a shadow will have the Australorps running like their dinosaurs' ancestors underneath, and then that 20% that genetically has not had that trait will be called from the herd, or called from the flock in this situation. That's wisdom. That's the wisdom that money cannot buy. It's the experiential. So as a mentor and colleague of mine, Richard Walker, who's an incredible food forester up here in Canada, used to say, go out, take a stick, dig a hole, plant a tree, because that is how we start to get feedback. And trees can be moved. Trust me, even at an old age, they can be moved. We can learn from all of these situations, but really do take the time and the energy and the money and the experience to put into skills and understanding your site. The way the world's going, the more of us that are skilled and able not to just press a button and if somebody else take the problem away, be it our manure, our feces, our urine, our water, our electricity, but really starting to take that on in a decentralized way, the more we are going to be able to resist and even be resilient, maybe even anti-fragile or regenerative in the uncertainty of what's coming. So, and what is already here in many situations. So I really do encourage you to continue to grow. Neil's an amazing consultant. If you're looking for a consultant down the States, I highly recommend contacting him after the course if you need more work. RT Permaculture and Neil's work is incredible. I can't speak highly enough. He's one of the designers I look to the most in the States. If you need help internationally, both Neil and I can help. My website's allpointsdesign.ca. If you're looking for life design, if you're coming up against some friction about what to do next, where to go, how to get into this type of business, it's something I've specialized in for the last 6 years. You can find more about that on allpointsdesign.ca/life design, or you could go to javankbernakevitch.com. But basically what I think both Neil and I want to tell you, and I'll let Neil tell it to you for himself, is don't stop. continue, keep learning, and keep learning in a realistic way. Don't hoard information. I've read these books. This shelf, is it this shelf or it's this shelf? One of these shelves are my to-read book. I think it's this one. I think it's that one. But the rest of them have been read, have been earmarked, and then I've gone out into the field to try and see if what's in that tomb of wisdom actually holds out in the real world. So please do take that energy, and thank you so much for being in the course. It's great to have other allies out there in the world who are doing this work. Neil, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I want to just second everything you said, and especially extend my gratitude to you for including me in this and for taking on most of the, actually all of the technical details of it. So I appreciate that. And I'm grateful that, Andrew has put together this opportunity for us to then kind of stack value on top of and customize it in our own way and share our thoughts. It's an amazing opportunity for everyone involved, both the teachers and the students, to connect with a more globally integrated and accessible community. So I'm really grateful for that. And thank you to all the students for participating and really, putting time and energy in to the assignments, to thinking through your site, for listening to our feedback, to adjusting your assignments and revising them. That's the reality of any design, especially when you get to the implementation stage. So, that accepting feedback, thinking it through, applying it where it's appropriate, and revising is a humbling part of the design process, especially when you start to implement it in the natural world. Not just when you're sharing your design with peers and mentors, but when you're starting to share your design with the ecology, you may get some extremely humbling feedback. So this is both good preparation for that, as well as I encourage you to get going and get that feedback. Remember that first principle is observe and interact. So make sure to do both of those, observe and interact the ripples in the pond that are created. Observe the interactions from the ripples in the pond that are created by your interactions, and listen to them, because this is really a life journey of listening to the landscape and ourselves and other people. And that's how you get a design that over time continues to evolve and really represent a place and a person and work well for you and for the ecology. So I encourage you to follow Javan's advice and start small, because that process of humbling can be expensive at the large scale, or it's not just money wise, it could also cost you time in maintaining it over the long term. So start small, build off your successes, enjoy it, and really share your joy and your experiences and your insights with others, and do it in a humble way. As Javan mentioned, this course doesn't give you wisdom, it just gives you information. And people that have done work for decades in the landscape, it's good to listen to them. They, especially those people that have done that type of work, usually care a lot about the ecology and have been very thoughtful about it. So that's something that I struggle with, and so I also am excited to share, is to go in with an open mind and an open ear, and often do more listening than speaking, especially when bringing this information to a group of people that are outside of the concept and are professionals in their field. So don't be afraid to try things, get started, start small, build on success, be humbled by the response of yourself and your family and the rest of the ecology to your actions, and listen to them and build off them. And I encourage you to just continue to value the relationships that you build with all the living beings on the planet, your people, your community, your landscape, the plants that you work with, animals you work with, because that's a great source of joy for me, and I hope that you all can take that from this course as well.
Thanks so much, Neil, and thanks so much everybody for watching and listening. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you and work with you. Be fruitful and multiply, and hopefully we see you again real soon.